My wife sobbed as she handed my parents $1,000 of her own money, believing she was paying off the last of her dead husband's debts. But she didn't know that I, her dead husband, was watching everything through a hidden camera my best friend had installed. I saw it all, and I did nothing. If you want to know why a husband could do something so cruel, and what the ultimate price for this monstrous deception was, hit that like button, support the channel, and listen to the very end. The lesson in this story will make you think. If I could go back in time, I never would have done it. Now, sitting behind these bars, the images of Emily and our son Leo are all that haunt me. These cold, concrete walls are nothing compared to the prison I built for myself with lies. It all started 5 years ago, in another life, when I was still Ethan, a husband, a father, a man with everything to lose. And I lost it all. It began with the silence of shame. I'd fallen into gambling, not the fun weekend kind, but the soul-crushing, life-destroying kind. It started small, a few poker games with friends, then online sites whispering promises of the next big win. But the big win never came. Instead, the losses piled up, one on top of the other. The debt wrapped around me like a toxic vine, choking the air from my lungs. The final number was $80,000, an impossible figure, a mountain I couldn't climb. The worst part was, I couldn't tell Emily. How could I look into the eyes of the woman who had placed her entire faith in me and confess that I had gambled away our family's future? How could I explain that the money she worked so hard for, the money meant for Leo, had vanished into thin air? The shame was greater than the fear. It was a monster gnawing at my self-respect, turning me into a stranger in my own home. Every night, as Emily talked about her day at the art gallery, about our dreams for a bigger house, I would just nod and smile while I was disintegrating on the inside. Then, a crazy, cowardly idea took root in my mind. An escape. Not a solution, but a flight from consequence. What if I just disappeared? If Ethan died, the debt would die with him. The loan sharks couldn't come after my family. Emily and Leo would be safe. That's how I justified the monstrous plan to myself. I convinced myself it was an act of sacrifice, not the ultimate act of cowardice. I needed accomplices, and tragically, I found them in my own family. My parents, Richard and Carol. They loved me, but their love was blinding. When I confessed the debt to them, they were horrified. But instead of telling me to face the music, they chose to help me hide. Maybe they feared the shame, the neighborhood gossip, or maybe they just couldn't bear to see their son fail. Whatever the reason, they agreed to be part of my charade. The last person I needed was Alex, my best friend since high school. Alex was the kind of guy who would do anything for a friend, no questions asked. He was a brilliant technician, resourceful, and dangerously loyal. When I laid out the plan, he didn't hesitate. "If you're sure this is the only way, man, I'm in," he'd said. His loyalty became the tool of my deception. The play was meticulously staged. I was working on a construction project out of state, a temporary job to make extra money. It was the perfect cover. Alex helped me create a fake workplace accident, a scaffolding collapse. No body was recovered intact, only mangled wreckage and my personal identification. It was all expertly forged. The cruelest part of the plan was the fabricated debt. My parents played their roles as grief-stricken, destitute elders to perfection. They told Emily that, just before I left, they had withdrawn their entire retirement savings, $30,000, to give to me to cover a business debt. Now, not only had they lost their only son, but they were left with nothing for their old age. It was a calculated lie, designed to prey on Emily's compassion and sense of duty, and she, my loyal, kind-hearted wife, believed it. In the depths of her grief, she took on the additional burden of guilt, thinking my debts had ruined them. "I'll pay it back to you," she sobbed to my parents on the day of my memorial service. "I won't let you suffer. It's what Ethan would have wanted." That day, Alex handed her an urn. Inside, of course, was not me. Just some ash from a fireplace and a few small stones to give it weight. Watching Emily clutch that urn, mourning a pile of fake ash, a part of me truly did die. But the cowardly part still won. The play had begun. I was dead to the world, dead to the woman I loved, and Emily, the grieving widow, began her 5-year journey of paying back a debt that never existed, to the very people who had stolen her husband from her. My new life began in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of an industrial park. The place was a tomb of metal and concrete, arranged by Alex. He had cleared out a corner, setting up a cot, an old desk, and a mini-fridge. This was my kingdom, a tiny world defined by 4 walls and a deafening silence. During the day, light struggled through grime-caked windows, painting dull stripes on the floor. There were no birds, only the sound of wind whistling through cracks and the distant rumble of trucks. Alex was my only link to the outside world, to the life I had abandoned. He'd visit every few days, always during daylight hours to avoid suspicion. He brought food, water, books, and, most importantly, news. He was my eyes and ears. Through Alex's reports, I watched Emily's life from afar, an invisible, parasitic ghost. "She sold her car," Alex announced during one visit, his voice hesitant. "Said taking the bus would save money." I sat frozen on the cot, the sandwich in my hand suddenly tasting like cardboard. That car had been my anniversary gift to her. I could still see her radiant smile the first time she got behind the wheel. Now, she'd given it up to pay for my lie. "She's picking up weekend shifts at the gallery," he told me another time, "and she's doing bookkeeping for a few small shops at night." I could picture it perfectly. Emily, after a long day on her feet, hunched over ledgers under a desk lamp, her eyes tired but determined. Determined to pay off a fake debt. Determined to keep a promise to the parents of the man who had betrayed her. Every month, on the 5th, Alex would bring me a portion of the $1,000 Emily had given my parents. They would keep a little for expenses and give the rest to Alex to pass to me. I would look at those crumpled bills, maybe still warm from Emily's hand, and feel like I was holding pieces of her soul. This money, along with what I earned from odd, off-the-books jobs Alex found for me, repairing unregistered machinery, dealing in old electronics, was what kept me alive. Alive in the hell of my own making. The guilt was a torturer that never slept. It gnawed at me during the day and haunted my dreams at night. I dreamt of Emily searching for me in a thick fog, calling my name, but I couldn't answer. I dreamt of Leo asking me, "Daddy, where did you go?" And I had no reply. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding against my ribs. The loneliness of the warehouse was immense, but the loneliness inside my own head was 1,000 times worse. Sometimes, selfishness would flare up. I'd tell myself I was doing the right thing. Emily and Leo were safe. The loan sharks weren't bothering them. But then I'd remember her sacrifices, and my justifications would shatter like glass. I wasn't a hero making a sacrifice. I was a parasite, feeding on the hard work and decency of the woman I had sworn to protect. Alex, for all his loyalty, was starting to show the strain. The weight of the lie was pressing down on him too. "Ethan, you can't live like this forever," he said, looking around the bleak warehouse. "This has to end sometime." "When? When the $30,000 is paid off?" I'd retort bitterly. "Or when my loan sharks just forget I exist?" Alex wouldn't answer. We both knew there was no easy answer. We had started a machine of deceit, and now we had no idea how to stop it without it blowing up in our faces. So, day after day, I continued to live as a ghost, imprisoned by my own fake freedom, while out in the real world, my wife carried the weight for both of us. For nearly 4 years, our twisted play ran with a frightening smoothness. The fragile stability almost made me believe I could live as a phantom forever. But then, a small crack appeared, an unforeseen detail from a source no one could have predicted. A neighbor. One afternoon, Alex arrived at the warehouse looking different. It wasn't his usual weariness. It was a visible, palpable anxiety. "We have a problem, Ethan," he said as soon as he walked in, foregoing any greeting. "What is it? Is Emily okay?" My heart leaped into my throat. "No, she's fine. The problem is at your parents' building. There's a neighbor, a Mrs. Gable." Mrs. Gable. I vaguely remembered her, an elderly widow who lived in the apartment across the hall from my parents. She was the type who knew everything that happened on her floor, a quiet observer. I'd never given her a second thought before. Now, her name sent a chill down my spine. "What about her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Alex set the bag of groceries down on the desk. "She's starting to notice things. Your mom told me. She asked why your parents, who supposedly lost all their savings, can still afford weekly high-end grocery deliveries. She asked how poor Mr. Richard with his bad heart managed to haul a new flat-screen TV upstairs by himself." Every word from Alex was like a hammer blow to my chest. My parents. I'd warned them to be careful, to live modestly, to play their parts convincingly. But perhaps time had made them careless. The comfort of having money from both Emily and me had made them forget they were on a stage, with an audience always watching. "That's not all," Alex continued, his voice low. "The worst part is, she's been talking to Emily." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Saying what?" She wasn't direct, just hints. "You're such a good girl, Emily, always looking after your in-laws. But you have to look out for yourself too. Sometimes old folks worry for nothing." Things like that. But your mum said the way she said it, the look she gave Emily, it planted a seed of doubt. A seed of doubt. That's all it would take. One seed to bring the entire forest of lies I had cultivated for years crashing down. Emily was smart and intuitive. She was fiercely loyal. But once that loyalty was shaken, she would not rest until she found the truth. I knew her better than anyone. From that day on, paranoia became my constant companion. Every strange noise outside the warehouse made me jump. Every time Alex was a few minutes late, my mind raced with the worst-case scenarios. The warehouse, once my sanctuary, now felt like a trap about to spring. The walls of deceit I had built were cracking, and I had no way to patch them. "We have to do something," I told Alex, pacing the small space. "Tell my parents to be more careful. Stop buying expensive things." "I did," Alex replied, a look of helplessness on his face. But they brushed it off. They said it's their money and they have a right to spend it. They said Mrs. Gable is just a nosy old woman. They had become so accustomed to the lie that they'd started to believe it themselves. They believed they deserved that comfortable life. They had forgotten that its price was being paid with Emily's sweat, tears, and sacrifice. My greatest fear wasn't being caught by the police. It was being discovered by Emily. I couldn't bear the thought of seeing the contempt in her eyes when she learned the truth. It was better for her to keep mourning a dead husband than to despise a living fraud. But there was nothing I could do. I could only sit in the darkness, wait, and hope that the seed of doubt Mrs. Gable had planted would never sprout. But deep down, I knew it was a futile hope. The storm was coming, and I was powerless to stop it. My play was nearing its final act. My futile hope collapsed faster than I could have imagined. A few weeks after the disturbing conversation about Mrs. Gable, Alex brought even worse news. This time, he looked genuinely terrified. "She knows," Alex said bluntly, wasting no time. "Or at least, she's on her way to knowing." "What do you mean? What happened?" I grabbed him by the shoulders. Alex pulled my hands off and sank into the only chair in the room. "Emily. She went to your parents' building management." "Why?" A sense of dread washed over me. "She told them she was worried about her in-laws' health, that they were elderly and living alone. She said she was afraid something might happen, a break-in or an accident. She requested access to the building's security camera footage, and they gave it to her." Security cameras. I had forgotten about them. The silent electronic eyes, recording everything objectively without emotion. They had recorded all of Alex's visits. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them over the past 4 years. Daylight visits, carrying bags of supplies. "Has she watched them yet?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She has. She spent an entire afternoon in the manager's office. He said she initially just wanted to check the entrances, but then she asked to review all the footage from your parents' hallway for the last 6 months. Specifically, on the days right after she gave them the money." My God, she was putting it together. She'd found a pattern. The day she delivered the money, and soon after, Alex would appear. The best friend of her dead husband, secretly bringing supplies to his parents. The story made no sense. "Did she see your face?" I asked Alex, desperately clinging to one last sliver of hope. "On the video." Alex shook his head. "I always wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, like you said. But Emily knows my walk. She knows my car. She's not stupid, Ethan." No, she wasn't stupid. I was the fool for ever thinking I could deceive her forever. I had underestimated her intelligence and her strength. Grief hadn't broken her. It had forged her into someone stronger, someone who would not accept half-truths. The next few days were a special kind of torture. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat in the warehouse, picturing Emily in front of a monitor, rewinding and replaying the footage. I imagined her eyes narrowing as she noticed the anomaly. I imagined the gears turning in her head, connecting the dots. Mrs. Gable's warnings, my parents' new possessions, Alex's mysterious visits. I was losing my mind. I told Alex to stop coming, but then I realized that no news was even more terrifying than bad news. At least I knew what my adversary was doing. My adversary, ironically, was the woman I still loved. "She asked your parents about me," Alex reported on his next visit. "She asked why I visit so often. Your mum lied, said I was helping with some repairs. But Emily didn't buy it. She just looked at them. A cold look your mum said she'd never seen before. Then she left without another word. Her silence was more terrifying than any accusation. It meant she no longer trusted them. She was on her own investigation now. She was no longer the tragic victim in our play. She had become the protagonist, a detective determined to unravel a conspiracy. I knew the security cameras were just the beginning. They told her what was happening, but not why. She wouldn't stop there. She would dig deeper. And I knew exactly where she would dig next. The place where our biggest lie was buried. The cemetery. The urn. "Alex," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It's almost over." He looked at me, his eyes wide with worry. "What should we do? Run?" I shook my head. "Run where? It's too late. We've been cornered by a woman armed with only one weapon. The truth." The waiting was worse than any verdict. I knew Emily would go to the cemetery. It was the next logical step. The urn was the physical symbol of my death, the foundation upon which all the lies were built. If that foundation crumbled, the entire structure would collapse. About a week after Alex told me about the security cameras, he appeared at the warehouse. This time, he didn't need to say a word. His ashen face and hollow eyes said it all. "She did it, didn't she?" I asked, my voice flat. Alex just nodded, slumping into the chair and burying his face in his hands. "Your dad called me. He went to the cemetery for his monthly visit to lay flowers. The groundskeeper stopped him. He said a woman matching Emily's description was there yesterday morning. She asked to be left alone in the columbarium for some private time. The groundskeeper said that after she left, he did a routine check and noticed the glass on your niche looked like it had been forced open." I closed my eyes. It was done. I could picture the scene vividly. Emily, standing alone in the quiet, sterile room. Her hands must have been trembling as she opened the glass case. She would have lifted the cold, ceramic urn. And then, somehow, she had opened it. Maybe she brought tools. Or maybe, in her determined state, she had simply smashed it. And she had seen. Not the ashes of her beloved husband. Just a handful of dirt and some meaningless stones. The truth, laid bare in the most brutal, profane way imaginable. I wondered what she felt in that moment. Horror? Disgust? Or a strange sense of relief? The final confirmation of what her gut had been telling her. All her grief over the past 5 years, the tears, the sleepless nights, the exhausting work shifts, all of it was based on a hoax. A cruel play orchestrated by the people she trusted most. "Your dad said he tried calling her," Alex continued, his voice muffled. "But she won't pick up." Of course she wouldn't. What was there left to say to them? The lie was exposed. The game was over. Unlike before, I didn't feel panic. Just a strange emptiness. A cold acceptance. The weight I had been carrying for 5 years seemed to lift. There was no more hiding, no more fear, just the naked truth and its inevitable consequences. "What are you going to do?" Alex asked, looking up at me. "Nothing," I replied. "I'm going to wait here." "We could run. I have some money saved. We could go to Mexico." I put a hand on his shoulder. "Stop, Alex. You've done more than enough for me. You don't deserve to be dragged down with me any further. Go home. When they come for you, tell them the whole truth. Cooperate." "I can't just leave you," he protested. "You're not leaving me. You're saving yourself. I caused this. I'll face it. Alone." After a long silence, Alex nodded. He stood up, gave me one last look, a mixture of pity, disappointment, and a flicker of our old friendship. And then he left, leaving me alone in the warehouse. For the first time, truly and completely alone. I don't know how long I waited. A day? 2? Time had lost all meaning in the warehouse. I didn't eat. I just sat on the cot, staring into space. I thought about Leo. He was a boy now. Would he even remember my face? Or was his image of his father just a faded photograph on a mantelpiece? I thought about Emily. I remembered our wedding day, the vows I'd made before God and everyone. To love, honor, and protect, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. I had broken every single one of them. I hadn't protected her. I had become the source of her pain. And then it came. Not a dramatic raid like in the movies, just a firm, decisive knock on the metal warehouse door. It was followed by a clear, authoritative voice. "Police! Ethan, we know you're in there. Open the door!" I took a deep breath. I stood up, walked to the door, and for the first time in 5 years, I stopped running. I was ready to face reality. The moment I slid the bolt and pulled open the heavy metal door, daylight flooded in, blinding and merciless. I had to squint. Standing before me were 3 police officers, their hands resting on their holsters, their faces grim. There was no surprise in their eyes. They knew exactly who they would find. "Ethan?" one of them asked, though it was more of a statement than a question. I nodded. "That's me." The arrest was quick and professional. They handcuffed me and read me my rights. As they led me out of the warehouse, I felt the fresh air of the outside world for the first time in 5 years. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like I was being moved from one invisible prison to a very visible one. At the police station, I didn't fight. I confessed to everything. The gambling debt, the faked death, the roles my parents and Alex played, right down to every last dollar Emily had worked for. I recounted the story in a flat, emotionless tone, as if I were talking about someone else's life. The confession brought no relief, only a stark confirmation of the depths to which I had sunk. I learned that my parents and Alex had also been arrested. Alex, true to my advice, had cooperated fully. My parents, on the other hand, had tried to deny everything until they were confronted with the irrefutable evidence. The trial was a waking nightmare. I stood in the defendant's box, wearing an orange jumpsuit, facing my consequences. But the worst part wasn't the prosecutor's damning words, or the curious stares from the courtroom spectators. The worst part was seeing Emily. She sat in the front row. She didn't cry. There was no hatred or rage in her eyes, just a powerful, terrifying calm. She looked at me, not like a monster, but like a stranger, a closed chapter in a book she was determined to finish. That look was more painful than any scream or curse. It showed that I no longer existed in her world. I had erased myself from her life, and now that erasure was permanent. The verdict came down. 8 years in prison for felony fraud. My parents, due to their age and health, received probation, but were ordered to pay back every cent they had taken from Emily, with interest. Alex, for his cooperation, received a lighter sentence. Justice had been served. Emily got her money back. But I knew no amount of money could repay the 5 years of her life she had wasted, and no apology could heal the wound of such a profound betrayal. What I had lost was irretrievable. My family, my freedom, and most importantly, my self-respect. Now, in this cell, I have nothing but time to think. Every day is a carbon copy of the last. I think about my choices, about that one moment I chose to run instead of to face my problems. One cowardly decision that set off a domino effect, destroying everything it touched. I had turned the woman I loved into my victim. I had robbed my son of a father. I had turned my parents into criminals. That is the real sentence. A sentence far heavier than any prison walls can contain. It's the life sentence of my own conscience. My story is not one of redemption. It is a cautionary tale. A tale about the destructive power of lies and cowardice. Sitting here, in the silence of my cell, I have learned a bitter lesson. The worst prison isn't built of brick and steel, but of your own lies. Every lie is a brick. Every cover-up is a layer of mortar. At first, you think you're building a shelter to hide from your problems, but in the end, you realize you've walled yourself into a tomb with no exit. Facing the truth, no matter how difficult or ugly, is always the right path. Admitting your failures takes courage, but running from them will cost you everything, including yourself. I chose to run, and the price was my soul. I lost the right to be a husband, a father, a decent human being. The message I want to leave with you, who are listening to this story, is simple but profound. Cherish trust. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can piece it back together, but the cracks will always remain. Never, ever make the people who love you most the victims of your own mistakes. Be brave enough to face your demons, because if you don't, you risk becoming a demon yourself. I hope my story can serve as a reminder. Before you decide to tell a lie, pause for a moment and consider its true cost. Thank you for listening. I want to ask you a couple of questions, and I would be grateful to read your thoughts in the comments. Do you think a person like me deserves forgiveness? Not from others, but from himself. And if you had one piece of advice for someone who is facing a difficult choice, terrified of facing the truth, what would you tell them? Your insights would be a small piece of light in this darkness.